Welcome to Bella's World, where real-life drama meets spicy secrets. Subscribe to never miss a new story.
It was just a kiss. But of course, he had to show up at my work party uninvited and act like I'd cheated on national television. I told him this wasn't his scene. My co-workers, my circle, my past. So maybe I kissed my ex. So what? Maybe if he were more confident, he wouldn't feel so threatened. But no. He had to make a scene and ruin everything. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. Now let's get back to the story. I'd mentioned the company holiday party to Liam earlier that week, more as a complaint about having to attend another corporate function than an actual invitation. He's sweet, don't get me wrong, but he works at a non-profit making $35,000 a year and has never quite understood the professional world I navigate every day. I figured he'd be relieved not to have to make small talk with VPs and senior directors, but apparently Liam had been listening more carefully than I thought, because at 8:30 on Friday night, right in the middle of my conversation with the regional manager about next year's budget projections, I spotted him walking through the glass doors onto the terrace. He was wearing his best dress shirt, the navy one I'd bought him for his birthday, and carrying a small gift bag that he clutched like a security blanket. My stomach dropped as I watched him scan the crowd, clearly looking for me. He looked so out of place among my colleagues in their designer suits and cocktail dresses, like a kid who'd wandered into the wrong classroom. I could see people noticing him, registering that he didn't belong, and I felt embarrassed for both of us. I was deep in conversation with Ethan near the bar when Liam finally spotted me. Ethan Chen, my ex from 2 years ago, who'd just been promoted to VP of Client Relations and looked absolutely stunning in his charcoal Tom Ford suit. We'd been catching up about old times and reminiscing about the projects we'd worked on together back when we were both junior associates grinding our way up the corporate ladder. Ethan had always been magnetic in ways that Liam never was. Confident, ambitious, the kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. We'd had incredible chemistry during our year-long relationship, but it had ended when he got transferred to the London office. Now he was back, newly single, and reminding me of what it felt like to be with someone who understood my world. We'd been talking for about an hour, standing close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne, when he made some joke about how we used to sneak into the supply closet during late nights at the office. I laughed and playfully pushed his shoulder, and he caught my hand and held it for just a moment longer than necessary. That's when it happened. Ethan looked at me with those dark eyes that had always made me forget everything else, and said how much he'd missed this, missed us. Before I could think about what I was doing, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft and familiar, and sent electricity through my entire body in a way I hadn't felt in months. For about 3 seconds I was 25 again, drunk on possibility and ambition, and the thrill of being desired by someone who was everything I thought I wanted. I kissed him back, my hand finding the lapel of his jacket, completely lost in the moment and the champagne and the memory of what we used to have together. That's when I heard someone drop something behind me, the distinctive sound of a gift bag hitting marble flooring, followed by the small crash of whatever was inside breaking. I turned around and saw Liam standing about 10 feet away, his face completely pale, staring at me like he'd just watched me murder someone. The entire terrace seemed to go quiet. I could feel dozens of eyes on us, could see phones being discreetly pulled out to capture what was clearly about to become a very public confrontation. My co-workers were pretending to continue their conversations while obviously straining to hear what would happen next. Liam just stood there for what felt like an eternity, looking between Ethan and me like he was trying to process what he'd witnessed. His mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. The hurt in his eyes was so raw and immediate that it actually made me feel guilty for a split second. But then my professional instincts kicked in. This was my workplace, my colleagues, my reputation on the line. I walked over to Liam and quietly but firmly asked, "Why are you even here?" I kept my voice low and controlled, trying to minimize the scene he was clearly about to make. Liam looked at me like I'd slapped him. He said he'd thought I wanted him to come, that I'd mentioned the party and he'd assumed he was invited. He said he'd brought me a gift and wanted to support me at my work function. His voice was shaking, and I could tell he was trying not to cry in front of all these strangers. I told him this wasn't the time or place for this conversation, that he was making me look unprofessional in front of my colleagues. I said we could talk about it later when we got home, but right now he needed to leave before he made things worse for both of us. Liam stood there for another long moment, looking at the scattered pieces of whatever he'd brought me on the marble floor. Then he said very quietly, "I trusted you, Zoe. I actually trusted you." He turned and walked away without looking back, leaving me standing there with everyone staring. I tried to play it off, turning back to Ethan with a casual smile and making some joke about relationship drama. But I could feel the whispers starting around us, could see my boss across the terrace looking at me with raised eyebrows. Someone had definitely recorded the whole thing on their phone. Ethan looked uncomfortable for the first time all evening. He said maybe we should cool it for the night, that he didn't want to cause problems for me at work. Then he disappeared into the crowd, leaving me alone at the bar trying to pretend my hands weren't shaking as I reached for another glass of champagne. Let me back up and explain how Liam and I got to this point, because I'm sure everyone thinks I'm some kind of monster who goes around kissing other men at work parties. The truth is more complicated than that, and if people understood the context, they might be less quick to judge my choices. Liam and I have been together for 18 months, and while he's a genuinely good person, we've always been from different worlds. I met him at a coffee shop near my office where he was working on his laptop, writing grant proposals for some environmental non-profit. He was cute, in a bookish way, and we started talking about the article I was reading about sustainable marketing practices. He asked me out for dinner that same week, and I said yes, because he seemed sweet and normal after a string of disappointing dates with guys from my industry who turned out to be either married or completely self-absorbed. Liam was refreshing in his sincerity and his genuine interest in making the world a better place. But as our relationship progressed, it became clear that we wanted very different things from life. Liam was content with his modest salary and his small apartment and his weekend hiking trips. He talked about eventually starting a family and buying a house in the suburbs and living a quiet, simple life focused on personal fulfillment rather than professional achievement. I, on the other hand, had worked my arse off to get where I was and had no intention of settling for mediocrity. I wanted the corner office, the 6-figure salary, the respect of my peers, and the lifestyle that came with real success. Liam supported my ambitions in theory, but I could tell he didn't really understand the sacrifices required to achieve them. The differences became more obvious as I advanced in my career. When I got promoted to senior account manager 6 months ago, Liam was happy for me, but also seemed intimidated by my new responsibilities and social circle. He'd make awkward jokes about me becoming too important to hang out with regular people, and I could tell he felt insecure about the gap between our professional lives. That's when Ethan came back from London and joined our team as the new VP of Client Relations. Seeing him again reminded me of what it felt like to be with someone who matched my ambition and understood the demands of climbing the corporate ladder. Ethan and I could talk about strategy and office politics and 5-year career plans in ways that Liam never could. Working with Ethan again brought back all the memories of how good we'd been together, professionally and personally. We'd been a power couple in the making, both of us hungry for success and willing to do whatever it took to achieve it. The chemistry had always been intense, and being around him again made me realize how much I'd been settling with Liam. I started staying later at work, partly because of increased responsibilities, but also because I enjoyed the conversations Ethan and I would have after everyone else went home. We'd discuss strategy over dinner at expensive restaurants, and he'd give me advice about positioning myself for the next promotion. It felt like being with someone who was truly my equal. Liam noticed that I was distracted and spending less time with him, but when he brought it up, I told him I was just busy with work. He suggested we plan a weekend getaway to reconnect, and I agreed because I felt guilty about how distant I'd been. But even during our romantic weekend at the beach, I found myself checking my phone constantly and thinking about projects Ethan and I were working on. The night of the work party, I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. It was a chance to network with senior leadership and position myself for bigger opportunities. I'd bought a new dress and gotten my hair done professionally because I knew this was an important evening for my career. When Ethan complimented me on how stunning I looked and suggested we grab drinks together, it felt natural and exciting. We found a quiet corner of the terrace and talked about his time in London, my recent successes with major clients, and the projects we might collaborate on in the future. As the evening progressed and the champagne flowed, our conversation became more personal. Ethan told me he'd often wondered what would have happened if he hadn't taken the London position, whether we might have ended up together long term. He said he'd never stopped thinking about me, and that seeing me succeed so brilliantly made him realize what he'd given up. I found myself flirting back, feeling more alive and attractive than I had in months. This was what it felt like to be appreciated by someone who understood my worth, who saw my ambition as an asset rather than a complication. When Ethan leaned in to kiss me, it felt like coming home to myself. The kiss lasted maybe 3 seconds before I remembered where we were and what I was doing. But in those 3 seconds, I felt more passion and connection than I'd experienced in my entire relationship with Liam. It reminded me of who I used to be before I started dimming my light to accommodate someone else's insecurities. I wasn't planning to hurt Liam or destroy our relationship. I was just caught up in a moment of nostalgia and possibility, remembering what it felt like to be desired by someone who was truly my equal. If Liam hadn't shown up uninvited and made such a scene, maybe we could have worked through this like adults. The Monday after the party, I walked into the office expecting everything to blow over and return to normal. I'd spent the weekend convincing myself that what happened was a minor indiscretion that had been blown out of proportion by Liam's dramatic reaction. But the moment I stepped off the elevator, I could tell something had shifted. My colleagues were giving me strange looks and whispering to each other when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The usual friendly greetings and small talk about weekend plans were replaced with awkward nods and quick subject changes. It felt like walking through a minefield where everyone knew about explosives except me. By Tuesday, I discovered why. Someone had posted a video of the kiss on LinkedIn with the caption, "VP caught with employee's girlfriend at networking event." The clip had gone viral in our industry circles, racking up thousands of views and hundreds of comments debating workplace ethics and professional boundaries. I watched the video with growing horror, seeing myself and Ethan from an outsider's perspective. What had felt like a moment of romantic spontaneity looked calculated and inappropriate on camera. You could see other party guests stopping their conversations to stare, and the timestamp showed the kiss had lasted longer than I remembered. The comments were brutal. People called me unprofessional, manipulative, a homewrecker even though Ethan was single. Several comments mentioned how humiliated my boyfriend must have felt, and a few people claimed to know the full story from mutual connections. My professional reputation was being dissected by strangers who felt entitled to judge my personal choices. Ethan pulled away immediately once the video started circulating. He sent me a brief email saying he couldn't be associated with this kind of scandal and that we needed to maintain strictly professional boundaries going forward. Just like that, the man who'd been telling me how much he missed me was pretending our connection had never existed. I tried calling him to discuss damage control strategies, but he wouldn't take my calls. When I cornered him in the break room, he said he had to think about his career and couldn't afford to be seen as someone who caused workplace drama. He said he hoped I understood that his priority had to be protecting his professional reputation. Meanwhile, Liam had blocked me on all social media and wasn't responding to my texts or calls. I tried everything from casual, "how are you doing" messages to longer explanations about how the kiss hadn't meant anything and that we needed to talk like adults. All my messages went unread, showing that he'd either blocked my number or was deliberately ignoring me. I started seeing mutual friends posting photos and updates that clearly included Liam, but made no mention of me. When I reached out to Sarah, who'd been one of my closest friends and had always liked Liam, she gave me a cold response about being busy with work. It became clear that people were choosing sides, and they weren't choosing mine. The isolation at work became unbearable as the week progressed. Projects I'd been leading were quietly reassigned to other team members. Meetings I should have been included in were happening without me. My boss started communicating through email rather than face-to-face conversations, and I could feel my colleagues avoiding me in the hallways. By Friday, I was called into HR for a formal meeting about workplace conduct. They didn't discipline me directly, but they made it clear that my behavior at the party had created an uncomfortable environment for other employees. They suggested I might be happier on a different team where I could have a fresh start without the baggage of recent events. That weekend, I found myself scrolling through social media obsessively, looking for any trace of Liam's activity. I found his Instagram account and saw that he'd posted photos from what looked like a hiking trip with friends. He looked relaxed and happy, like someone who'd removed a source of stress from his life rather than lost something valuable. In one photo, he was laughing at something off camera, and there was a girl next to him who I didn't recognize. She was pretty in a natural, outdoorsy way, wearing hiking boots and a ponytail, looking completely comfortable in the environment that Liam loved. The caption mentioned having great company for the trail, and there were heart emojis in the comments from people who clearly approved of this development. For the first time since the party, I felt genuine panic. Liam wasn't sitting at home devastated and waiting for me to fix things. He was moving on, possibly with someone who appreciated the qualities I'd taken for granted. Someone who thought his kindness and stability were assets rather than limitations. I started scrolling through photos of our last vacation together, taken just 3 months earlier. We'd gone to a bed and breakfast in Vermont, and the pictures showed us looking genuinely happy and connected. Liam's arm was around me in most of the photos, and he was looking at me with such obvious love and admiration that it made my chest tight to see it now. In one picture, we were sitting by a fireplace after a day of apple picking, both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember. I was leaning into him like he was my safe place, my home base, the person I could be completely myself with. Looking at that photo, I wondered for the first time if I'd just sabotaged the only real thing I'd ever had. The next few weeks were a masterclass in self-delusion, as I tried to convince myself that I was better off without Liam and that the workplace drama would eventually blow over. I told myself that he'd never been on my level anyway, that I deserved someone with more ambition and sophistication. But the more I repeated these mantras, the more hollow they sounded. My nights became increasingly difficult as the reality of my situation set in. I'd always been a social person who thrived on connection and validation, but suddenly I was coming home to an empty apartment with no one to talk to about my day. The silence was deafening after 18 months of having someone who genuinely cared about my experiences and feelings. I started drinking more wine with dinner, then moved to having a glass or two while cooking, then eventually found myself opening bottles at 4 p.m, just to take the edge off the loneliness. Sleep became elusive as my mind raced through all the ways I could fix the situation or prove that I wasn't the villain everyone thought I was. That afternoon, HR called me in for another meeting. This time, they were more direct about the consequences of my actions. They said the viral video had reflected poorly on the company's professional culture, and they felt it would be best for everyone if I transferred to our smaller satellite office across town. It was technically a lateral move, but we all knew it was a demotion disguised as damage control. My direct supervisor, someone I'd considered a mentor and ally, told me privately that I'd disappointed her with my poor judgment. She said I'd been on track for a promotion before this incident, but now she wasn't sure when or if that opportunity would arise again. She suggested I focus on rebuilding my professional reputation rather than advancing my career for the foreseeable future. That evening, I found myself walking past the cafe where Liam and I used to meet after work when our schedules aligned. We'd sit at our usual table by the window and share coffee and pastries while talking about our days. He'd always be genuinely interested in my work stories, even when they involved people and situations he'd never encountered. I sat at our old table and ordered the lavender latte that Liam had introduced me to, remembering how he'd insisted I try it because he thought I'd love the unique flavour. He'd been right, of course, just like he'd been right about so many little things that I'd dismissed as unimportant because they weren't related to career advancement or social status. Scrolling through our old text conversations on my phone, I saw a pattern I'd been blind to while we were together. Liam constantly asked about my day, remembered details about projects I was working on, celebrated my successes like they were his own achievements. He'd send me encouragement before big presentations and funny memes when I was stressed about deadlines. In contrast, my messages to him were mostly logistical, confirming plans, asking him to pick things up from the store, brief responses to his longer messages about his work and interests. I'd been so focused on my own concerns that I'd never really invested in learning about his passions or supporting his goals the way he'd supported mine. The last message in our thread was from him, sent the morning of the work party. He'd written, "Good luck tonight. I know you're going to impress everyone. Can't wait to hear how it goes." I'd read it and forgotten to respond because I was busy getting ready. Now it felt like a monument to everything I'd taken for granted. I finally understood what Liam had meant when he said he trusted me. It wasn't just about fidelity or commitment, but about believing that I valued our relationship enough to protect it from outside threats. He'd trusted me to choose him, to choose us, when faced with temptation or uncertainty. And I'd proven that his trust was misplaced. Sitting alone in that coffee shop, watching couples walk by holding hands and sharing inside jokes, I finally understood what I'd lost. Liam hadn't been holding me back or limiting my potential. He'd been the one person in my life who saw me clearly and loved me anyway, who celebrated my successes without needing them to reflect his own worth. I thought I was too good for him, too ambitious and sophisticated for his simple dreams and modest lifestyle. Turns out, I was just too blind to see what I had. Too focused on climbing ladders and impressing people who didn't really know me to appreciate the person who did. And now I'm alone, which is exactly what I deserve. Liam was the only one who ever really saw me, not the polished professional version or the networking event persona, but the real me underneath all the performance. And I pushed him out because I was bored, because I wanted excitement, because I thought I could do better. I couldn't do better. I had the best, and I threw it away for a meaningless kiss that lasted 3 seconds and destroyed 18 months of love and trust and possibility. Now he's building something beautiful with someone who recognizes his worth, while I'm starting over at 27 with the knowledge that I'm capable of sabotaging my own happiness for absolutely nothing.
Subscribe to never miss a new story.